What is asbestos? Asbestos is a general term for several naturally occurring fibrous mineral silicates. There are 6 distinct types of asbestos: actinolite, amosite, anthophyllite, chrysotolite, tremolite, and chrysotile. Each is different in physical and chemical properties depending on the other components of the rock, such as calcium, magnesium, or iron. There are 2 types of mineral groups based on crystalline structure. First, serpentine. There is 1 member. It is chrysotile. And secondly, amphibole. The most important members are chrysotolite and amosite. Chrysotile, a fibrous form of serpentine in a hornblende group of amphiboles known as white asbestos. Chrysotolite, the asbestiform variety of the amphibole riebeckite, known as blue asbestos. Amosite, the asbestiform variety of the amphibole grunerite, known as brown asbestos. All types of asbestos tend to break into very tiny fibers. These individual fibers are so small they must be identified using a microscope. Some fibers may be up to 700 times thinner than a human hair. Because asbestos fibers are so small, once released into the air, they may stay suspended for hours or even days. One study estimated that 3,000 different types of commercial products contained asbestos. Asbestos-containing material, or known with the acronym ACM, means any material containing more than 1% asbestos. The amount of asbestos in each product varied from as little as 1% to as much as 100%. Chrysotile is the most common type found in building materials. Many older plastics, paper products, brake linings, floor tile, textile products contain asbestos, as do many heavy industrial products such as sealants, cement pipe and sheeting, and insulation. In summary, asbestos is a mineral. 3 common types of asbestos are chrysotile, known as white asbestos and is the most common found in building products; chrysotolite, known as blue asbestos; amosite, known as brown asbestos. Some fibers may be 700 times thinner than a human hair. It is found in over 3,000 different products. It's manufactured in many products such as floor tile, mastics, cement and paper products, insulation, and many more. Asbestos has been utilized for thousands of years due to its qualities as a materials binder, the insulation quality, and the fireproofing capabilities. It was named by the ancient Greeks, its name meaning inextinguishable. The Greeks also noted its harmful biological effects. Asbestos use was brought back in the 1700s, but did not become popular until the Industrial Revolution during the late 1800s. It then began to be used as insulation for steam pipes, turbines, boilers, kilns, ovens, and other high-temperature products. At the turn of the 20th century, researchers began to notice a large number of deaths and lung problems in asbestos mining towns. In 1917 and 1918, it was observed by several studies in the United States that asbestos workers were dying unnaturally young. In the 1930s, major medical journals began to publish articles that linked asbestos to cancer. The rediscovery of asbestos-related diseases were put on the back burner for several years due to the emergence of silicosis, a lung disease caused by silica dust inhalation. By the mid-20th century, uses included fire-retardant coatings, concrete, bricks, pipes, and fireplace cement, heat, fire, and acid-resistant gaskets, pipe insulation, ceiling insulation, fireproof drywall, flooring, roofing, and drywall joint compound. Approximately 100,000 people in the United States have died or will die from asbestos exposure related to shipbuilding. In the Hampton Roads area, a shipbuilding center, mesothelioma occurrence is 7 times the national rate. There were approximately 4.3 million shipyard workers in the United States during World War II. For every 1,000 workers, about 14 died of mesothelioma, and an unknown number died from asbestosis. The United States government and asbestos industry have been criticized for not acting quickly enough to inform the public of dangers and to reduce public exposure. In the late 1970s, court documents proved that asbestos industry officials knew of asbestos dangers since the 1930s and had concealed them from the public. In 1989, the EPA issued the Asbestos Ban and Phase-Out Rule, which was subsequently overturned in the case of corrosion-proof fittings versus EPA. This ruling leaves many consumer products that can still legally contain trace amounts of asbestos. To summarize, asbestos has been used for thousands of years, named by the ancient Greeks meaning inextinguishable, popular in the Industrial Revolution of the late 1800s. First official diagnosis of asbestosis was in 1924. The U.S. asbestos industry began in 1858. In the U.S., the EPA issued the 1989 Phase-Out Ban Rule. Many U.S. consumer products can still have trace amounts. Spray applied fireproofing and insulation in buildings. Insulation for pipes and boilers. Wall and ceiling insulation. Ceiling tiles. Floor tiles and flooring mastic. Putties, caulks, and cements. Roof shingles. Siding shingles on old residential buildings. Wall and ceiling texture in older buildings and homes. Joint compound and wallboard in older buildings and homes. Brake linings and clutch pads, just to name a few. Buildings that have asbestos-containing materials in them will have notices posted near main entrances, frequently near the fire alarm panel. Pipe and boiler insulation that contains asbestos will be labeled with identifying stickers and placards.
Asbestos-containing ceiling tiles may not be labeled or marked. These tiles cannot be differentiated from other tiles by visual means. They must be analyzed by a laboratory test. And in summary, where asbestos is found: spray-applied fireproofing, pipe and boiler insulation, wall and ceiling insulation, floor tile, mastics, caulks, cements, roofing and siding shingles, wallboard, joint compound, decorative textures, brake linings, gaskets, and many other locations. Asbestos is dangerous. The most common way for asbestos fibers to enter the body is through inhalation or breathing. In fact, asbestos-containing material is not generally considered to be harmful unless it is releasing dust or fibers into the air where they can be inhaled or ingested. Many of the fibers will become trapped in the mucous membranes of the nose and throat, where they can then be removed by coughing, sneezing, or blowing. But some may pass deep into the lungs, or if swallowed, into the digestive tract. Once they are trapped in the body, these fibers can cause health problems. Asbestos is most hazardous when it is in a friable form. The term friable means that the asbestos is easily crumbled by hand, releasing fibers into the air. Sprayed-on asbestos insulation is highly friable. Asbestos floor tile, unbroken, is usually not. Asbestos-containing ceiling tiles, floor tiles, undamaged laboratory cabinet tops, shingles, fire doors, siding, etc., typically will not release asbestos fibers unless they are disturbed or damaged in some way. If an asbestos ceiling tile is drilled or broken, for example, it may release fibers into the air. If it is left alone and not disturbed, typically it will not. Asbestos pipe and boiler insulation does not present a hazard unless the protective canvas covering is cut or damaged in such a way that the asbestos underneath is actually exposed to the air. Damage and deterioration will increase the friability of asbestos-containing materials. Water damage, continual vibration, aging, and physical impacts such as drilling, grinding, buffing, cutting, sawing, or striking can break the materials down, making fiber release more likely. Health effects. Because it is so hard to destroy asbestos fibers, the body cannot break them down or remove them once they are lodged in lung or body tissues. They may remain in place where they can cause disease. There are 3 primary diseases associated with asbestos exposure: asbestosis, lung cancer, and mesothelioma. Asbestosis is a scarring of lung tissue caused by the inhalation of asbestos fibers. When humans inhale asbestos fibers, a portion of those fibers reach the alveoli, air sacs in the lungs, where oxygen is transferred into the blood. The presence of asbestos in the lungs starts a reaction best described as an inflammatory process. Scar tissue slowly builds up and in some individuals will progress to where it interferes with lung function, including the reduction of lung volumes and impairment of the lung's ability to deliver oxygen to the blood and receive back carbon dioxide. The inflammatory process may continue undetected for decades, causing no pain or respiratory symptoms. Eventually, in some people, the process will produce symptoms, abnormal breathing, and radiographic changes. The first symptoms, usually experienced by individuals with an asbestos-related lung disease, are shortness of breath on exertion and associated chest pain. These symptoms often precede abnormalities on chest X-ray or pulmonary function tests. The period between exposure and diagnosis is called the latency period and may range from 10 to 50 years. A number of studies show there is a considerable increase in cases of lung cancer in workers with prior asbestos exposure. This increased incidence is particularly significant among asbestos-exposed workers who smoke. There appears to be a synergistic or multiplying effect between asbestos exposure and cigarette smoking in the causation of lung cancer. Although the magnitude of the risk varies from study to study, it is generally conceded that there is a dose-response relationship both for the degree of asbestos exposure and the amount of cigarette smoking. The latency period for lung cancer will range from 10 to 30 years. Individuals with heavy asbestos exposure, who are also heavy smokers, have an incidence of lung cancer as much as 90 times greater than the incidence of lung cancer in non-smokers without asbestos exposure. Treatment of asbestos-related lung cancer is virtually identical to the treatment for other lung cancers and may include surgery, radiation therapy, and/or chemotherapy. However, in most instances, the victim's prognosis is poor. Mesothelioma is a rare cancer of the mesothelial cells that make up various membranes in a person's chest or abdominal cavity. This includes the pleura that encases the lungs. The pleura facilitates lung movement during breathing without motion sensation or nerve irritation inside the chest. Mesothelioma is not lung cancer, although it frequently causes respiratory problems as the tumor grows and spreads along the surface of the internal organs along serosal membranes. When it develops, mesothelioma is almost always caused by asbestos. Mesothelioma most often occurs in two areas, forming extremely serious malignant tumors. Pleural mesothelioma, cancer of the pleura, the membrane that lines the lung and the chest cavity, and peritoneal mesothelioma, cancer of the peritoneum, which is the serosal membrane lining the abdomen. The latency period is usually at least 10 to 15 years, and is reported in the recent medical journals to be as long as over 60 years. A period of 40 years from exposure to diagnosis is not uncommon. Mesothelioma can be caused by very brief, low-dose exposures to asbestos. Evidence suggests that cancers in the esophagus, larynx, oral cavity, stomach, colon, and kidney may be caused by ingesting asbestos. For more information on asbestos-related cancers, contact your local chapter of the American Cancer Society. Certain contributors seem to determine your likelihood of developing one of the asbestos-related diseases. The amount and duration of exposure. The more you are exposed to asbestos and the more fibers that enter your body, the more likely you are to develop asbestos-related problems. While there is no safe level of asbestos exposure, people who are exposed more frequently over a long period of time are more at risk. Whether or not you smoke. If you smoke and you have been exposed to asbestos, you are far more likely to develop lung cancer than someone who does not smoke and who has not been exposed to asbestos. If you work with asbestos or have been exposed to it, the first thing you should do to reduce your chances of developing cancer is to stop smoking. Smoking is the leading cause of preventable death in 443,000 Americans each year. Secondhand smoke will kill 49,000 people this year alone. Don't be a statistic. Smoking weakens the lungs, contributing to the negative health effects of asbestos exposure. One of the greatest combined risks involves lung cancer. Smoking alone can cause lung cancer. Asbestos exposure alone can also cause lung cancer. Taken together, asbestos and smoking multiply the risk of lung cancer significantly. The combined effects are often referred to as synergistic. In our summary, asbestos-containing materials are not generally considered to be harmful unless it is releasing dust or fibers into the air where they can be inhaled or ingested. The term friable means that the asbestos is easily crumbled by hand, releasing fibers into the air. There are three primary diseases associated with asbestos exposure: asbestosis, lung cancer, and mesothelioma. The more you are exposed to asbestos, and the more fibers that enter your body, the more likely you are to develop asbestos-related problems. If you smoke and you have been exposed to asbestos, you are far more likely to develop lung cancer than someone who does not smoke and who has not been exposed to asbestos.